Jordan Peterson never sugar-coated human nature, especially when it comes to the brutal truths about relationships. And one of the hardest truths he's pointed to over and over again is this: women lose respect for men who refuse to carry the weight of their own lives. If that sentence hits something in you, good, that's the point. Before we go further, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching this from. And while you're there, name one thing you're no longer willing to tolerate from yourself. Because here's the core of it: men who avoid responsibility, who fold under pressure, who wait for someone else to fix their chaos. These men lose not only the respect of women, but the respect of themselves. Peterson's insight is brutal because it removes all excuses. He's not saying you need to be perfect. He's saying you need to stand up straight with your shoulders back and face what's in front of you. Because when you don't, you become something easy to walk over. And no woman respects a man she can walk over. Respect isn't given for being nice. It's earned by being grounded, decisive, and unshakable, especially when things get ugly. And here's what most men don't realize: the second you start dodging the hard parts of life, people around you feel it. They sense the weakness, the drift, the softness. And women especially, whether consciously or not, start pulling away. Not because they want perfection, but because they want presence. And presence doesn't come from talking about your potential. It comes from taking responsibility for it. So the question is simple: are you building the kind of life that commands respect? Or are you hoping for validation while everything burns behind you? Because Peterson's hardest truth is this: no one is coming to save you. And if you don't step up, she will step away. Respect isn't some mysterious force that just appears when someone likes you enough. It's not about charm, popularity, or how much you can impress others. It's a response, a deep, almost primal recognition of how you carry yourself when no one's clapping, no one's watching, and nothing feels easy. Jordan Peterson has long argued that competence, real, demonstrated competence, is the bedrock not only of self-respect, but of how the world reacts to you, especially in relationships. When a man avoids responsibility, when he sidesteps the hard choices or constantly looks to others to fix what's broken, he's doing more than just delaying growth. He's building a life on sand. He may look for a woman to fill in his missing backbone. He'll call it love, connection, even vulnerability. But it's dependency wrapped in sentiment. And deep down, she feels it. She knows she's carrying weight that shouldn't be hers. What started as affection quickly morphs into fatigue. And in time, she stops seeing him as a man to admire and starts seeing him as a burden to manage. This shift doesn't happen because women are cold or ruthless. It happens because respect has rules. And when you break those rules, the consequences follow. Peterson consistently warns against becoming the kind of man who hides behind excuses, who waits for circumstances to change before he takes action. That man may not be weak by nature, but he's chosen weakness by default. That choice, repeated enough, becomes identity. Here's the uncomfortable truth: strength isn't something that arrives in the mail one day. It's a decision, a brutal, daily choice. You don't wait until you feel brave. You act in spite of fear. You don't wait until the path is clear. You step forward anyway. Strength is built through fire, through trial, through relentless honesty with yourself. And when you make that shift, when you stop demanding that others reassure you and start showing through action who you are, you don't just gain respect. You command it, not by force, but by gravity, by presence. Because you become the kind of man who doesn't just talk about potential, he lives it. And people, especially women, feel that difference. They may not be able to articulate it, but they sense it. A man grounded in his path, who's owned his flaws and doesn't run from discomfort, has a kind of magnetic weight to him. He doesn't need to chase approval because his life speaks louder than any words. A man who owns his pain, owns his past, and still walks forward, he's not just respected, he's untouchable, because nothing external defines him anymore. This is why Peterson's harshest truths matter. They're not attacks, they're wake-up calls. Because until you face yourself, without flinching, without excuses, you'll keep looking to others for a sense of worth they can't give you. And the longer you do that, the more your life becomes a reflection of avoidance instead of strength. The question isn't whether the world respects you, it's whether you've given it a reason to. A man who constantly seeks approval is a man already losing the game. Jordan Peterson talks about this subtle dynamic. The man who trades his authenticity for acceptance, who nods when he should speak, who blends in hoping not to offend. He may be liked, he may be agreeable, but he is not respected. And here's the harsh reality. Women don't fall for men they can lead. They fall for men they can trust. Trust with direction, trust with strength, trust with uncomfortable truths. If you're constantly editing yourself to fit someone else's preferences, you're not building connection, you're building resentment. Peterson emphasizes the importance of integrating your shadow, the part of you that knows how to say no, how to draw a line, how to walk away. Without that, you're just a shell of what you could be. A man who doesn't know how to access his assertiveness becomes emotionally passive. He lets life happen to him. And women can feel that. There's no polarity, no leadership, no edge. And so, slowly, the dynamic shifts. She starts making the decisions. She carries the emotional weight. She tests him, subtly, then directly. Not to destroy him, but to feel whether there's still any fire left. And if she keeps finding smoke instead of heat, that's when the distance begins. Because deep down, no woman wants to mother her partner. She may do it out of frustration or habit, but never out of desire. She wants to respect your power, not manage your passivity. And if you've been there, if you've watched the dynamic shift and wondered what changed, it wasn't her. It was what you stopped protecting in yourself. The moment a man gives up his mission to chase validation, he enters dangerous territory. Jordan Peterson warns of the cost when men abandon their path in favor of emotional approval. At first, it looks like harmony. He's flexible, supportive, always there. But underneath, something is breaking. His purpose begins to fade. That quiet erosion doesn't happen all at once. It starts when you stop prioritizing your own goals. It continues when you rearrange your life for someone else's comfort. And eventually, you look in the mirror and don't recognize the man staring back. Women don't respect a man who loses himself in her orbit. They want a man who brings gravity of his own, a man with standards, a man who doesn't flinch when she tests him. Because testing isn't cruelty, it's instinct. She needs to feel you're anchored before she can fully trust. And if your anchor is her, she'll drift away. Not because she doesn't care, but because no one wants to be the thing a man leans on when he should be standing tall. Peterson urges men to reclaim their direction, not with rage, but with discipline. Discipline to set boundaries. Discipline to speak with clarity. Discipline to stay committed to what actually matters. This doesn't mean shutting her out. It means refusing to shut yourself down. A relationship shouldn't silence your drive. It should sharpen it. But that only happens when your foundation is solid. When you stop asking who you need to become for her and start asking who you refuse to stop being for yourself. That's where self-respect begins, and that's where her respect follows. Jordan Peterson often warns against the slow decay that happens when a man compromises his core values to preserve a relationship. It starts with something small, a little silence when something should have been said, a little agreement just to keep the peace. But every time you choose comfort over clarity, you give something away, and women can sense it. The problem isn't that you're being too kind. The problem is you're being dishonest with yourself and with her. You're saying yes when you mean no. You're showing up without conviction, and respect cannot survive in that space. She begins to feel something is off, not because you're failing, but because you're fading. That edge she once admired becomes dull. That direction she once trusted becomes hesitant. And over time, admiration turns into obligation. Peterson calls for men to become articulate, not just with words, but with presence, with posture, with the ability to confront chaos without flinching. Because if you won't confront your own discomfort, someone else will have to. And that someone is usually her. This is the uncomfortable truth. The more you try to be everything for her, the less of yourself you become. And the less of yourself you become, the harder it is for her to see anything worth respecting. You don't earn loyalty by erasing your edges. You earn it by becoming a man she can't push around, not because you dominate, but because you're rooted, clear, grounded, unapologetically whole. And until you reclaim those pieces you've given away, out of guilt, fear, or need, you'll keep wondering why respect slips further from your grasp. Peterson makes it brutally clear. When a man loses his mission, he loses himself. And when that happens, the people around him, especially the woman in his life, can sense it. Not through words, but through energy, through posture, through silence that used to feel strong, but now just feels hollow. You become directionless, soft in all the wrong ways. You don't speak from conviction. You check her face for approval before you open your mouth. You don't move with certainty. You wait for permission. And here's what you don't see: that kills attraction, that starves the polarity, that turns desire into duty. A man off his path isn't neutral, he's unstable. And when your center is missing, no one feels safe around you. Not even the people who love you, especially not them. And here's the trap. The more you fall away from your mission, the more you cling to her for identity. You want her to fill the hole that only purpose can fill. But the more you lean, the more pressure she feels. And pressure kills intimacy. She starts to pull back, and you panic. So you try harder, you get nicer, you bend further. But all she sees is a man who gave up something essential. And she doesn't know how to say it, but she feels it. You lost yourself to keep her. And that's exactly when she starts to leave. Not because she stopped loving you, but because you stopped being someone she could respect. That's Peterson's warning in its rawest form. If you don't anchor yourself in something bigger than her, you'll drown both of you trying to keep her close. Jordan Peterson often points out that the man who refuses to confront chaos is the man who becomes enslaved by it. And nowhere is this more evident than in how a man handles emotional pressure. Not just from the world, but from a woman. Many men mistake silence for strength. They think that if they suppress their frustration, their uncertainty, their needs, they're being stoic. But that's not stoicism. That's fear in disguise. And over time, that kind of silence turns into weakness, not power. Women feel this. They sense when you're withholding, when you're not fully present. They feel when you're walking on eggshells, trying not to rock the boat. At first, they might interpret it as patience, but eventually, it registers as avoidance. And the deeper truth is, a woman cannot respect a man who is afraid of her emotions. Peterson warns that by refusing to confront discomfort, men allow emotional manipulation to grow unchecked. They think avoiding conflict will earn peace, but all it does is trade long-term respect for short-term calm. And here's the cost. When you don't speak your truth, when you avoid saying no, when you compromise what matters to you just to keep her happy, you don't build love. You build resentment, quiet, bitter, unspoken, but it leaks out in every interaction, every pause, every look. A strong man doesn't seek conflict, but he doesn't flinch from it either. He understands that setting boundaries isn't aggression, it's clarity. And without clarity, the relationship rots from the inside out. The strength she's testing for isn't about control, it's about self-possession. She wants to feel that you are rooted enough to hold your own, no matter what energy she brings. And if you can't do that, you'll keep losing not just her respect, but your own. When a man ignores his mission, everything around him begins to rot: his confidence, his relationships, his self-respect. Jordan Peterson often points to the chaos that creeps in when a man abandons structure, when he forgets the weight of meaning and trades it for short-term comfort. And the result? A life that shrinks, day by day. This is where most men fail. Not in talent, not in intelligence, but in purpose. They let it drift. They postpone the pursuit of what matters most. They sedate themselves with distractions, with validation, with low-effort pleasures that feed nothing and build nothing. And it shows. In their body, in their voice, in the way people stop listening when they speak. A man without purpose becomes invisible. This is why, when a woman senses her man has lost his mission, or never claimed one to begin with, respect quietly exits the room. She won't always say it, but she'll feel it, and that shift is rarely recoverable. You can't fake a mission. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, everything else collapses under the weight of that emptiness. You become reactive instead of intentional. You over-apologize. You seek instead of lead. You collapse at the first sign of resistance. Peterson doesn't frame this as a motivational pep talk. He frames it as survival, as the psychological foundation of a man's identity. Without a clear aim, your psyche crumbles. And your relationships? They follow. Purpose doesn't just give you drive, it gives you posture, direction, gravity. And without that, you're just drifting through life, waiting for someone to give you meaning. But meaning isn't given, it's built. One act of responsibility at a time. Most men think the danger is rejection, but the real danger is slow erosion, the kind that happens when you give an inch, then another, until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Jordan Peterson doesn't romanticize relationships. He reminds men that losing your edge, your discipline, your mission, in the name of comfort or harmony, is the quickest path to becoming invisible. Respect isn't maintained through constant agreement. It's maintained through internal alignment. A man who knows what he stands for and refuses to bend for short-term validation radiates something rare in today's world: self-command. And this is where so many men fail. Not in their feelings, not in their capacity to love, but in their failure to remain grounded while loving. They trade their priorities for peace. They let their routines slide. They lose their drive, not all at once, but in small, quiet betrayals to themselves. What Peterson teaches is that a man must be willing to walk alone, not as a threat or manipulation tactic, but because solitude is the forge of integrity. If you can't sit with your own silence, you'll never withstand someone else's noise. Women don't lose respect because you're not rich or famous. They lose it because you abandon your self-respect first. And once that's gone, everything else follows. So the question is, where are you shrinking to keep her close? What truth are you avoiding just to keep the peace? Because the longer you avoid it, the harder it will be to find your way back. Jordan Peterson often says that meaning is found on the other side of responsibility. But most men today are trained to avoid responsibility like it's a trap. They fear being blamed, being wrong, being judged. So they settle. They become smaller, quieter, and they call that humility. But it's not humility. It's fear in disguise. And women can see it, not just see it, feel it. They don't need a man to be invincible, but they do need him to be rooted. A man who stands for something. A man who can be challenged without crumbling. A man who doesn't just talk about integrity, but lives it when no one's watching. When you abandon that mission, when you soften your voice, shrink your presence, or beg for connection, you don't just lose her respect, you lose your own. That's the real tragedy. Because once self-respect dies, everything else is negotiation. Peterson never told men to dominate others. He told them to master themselves, to become the kind of man whose words matter because they are backed by action. The kind whose presence calms chaos, not adds to it. The kind whose life demands respect because it's built on principles, not performance. So what happens when a man stops chasing approval and starts building himself? He becomes undeniable, not loud, not aggressive, just clear. And the moment you become clear, the right people align, the wrong ones vanish, and the woman who's meant for you, she doesn't want to fix you. She just wants to stand beside a man who doesn't need to be saved. Because in the end, respect isn't requested, it's earned, one choice at a time.